This meeting is being recorded.
For ease, sometimes it would be helpful in these all Zoom meetings if the directors are able to and willing to turn their cameras on, and that way they will show up towards the top of everybody's screen, and we'll be able to see if you have an interest. Otherwise, sometimes you get bumped to the back of the room, the Zoom room, if you will. But I understand if you can't turn your camera on. So,
Right.
okay. Madam President, would you like Stephanie to take a roll call?
Yes, let's start with the roll call.
Eldon Vandenbrink, Doug Monger,
Here.
Just so we keep track.
Put it here. Oh, I have.
John Ely,
Here.
Kathleen Curry,
Here.
Matthew Chandler Henry,
Here.
Mark Catlin,
Here.
Mark Rober,
Mark is here.
I'm here.
Martha Whitmore, Mike Richard, Phoebe Hazard,
Here.
Scott McGinnis,
Here.
Stan Winery, Steve Beckley, Taylor Haas,
Here.
Tom Gray.
Here.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the February 2nd, 23 meeting of the River District, Groundhog's Day. Probably feels like it in some cases. Don't forget to mute if you are not speaking. And if you use the hand raise button, we'll try to make sure that we notice that. So the first thing on our agenda is External Affairs Report, Federal and State Legislative Issues. Zane, you look very spiffy. You must be meeting with important folks today.
Fellow lobbyists at the Capitol, so not that important, but I am down at the Capitol. We are in full swing down here, and I did send out a legislative update yesterday to the board, including 2 bills that I'd like to bring to your attention. It is of course up to the board whether or not to take a position, but I'm happy to dive in on those now if that's what you want.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I will note that Stan Winery and Steve Beckley have joined us as well. Welcome.
Thank you. The first bill for your consideration is Senate Bill 057. This is an attempt by the Colorado County Treasurers Association to update the statutes pertaining to county treasurers serving as ex officio treasurer for drainage districts, irrigation districts, and internal improvement districts in the state. This does impact a handful of our irrigation districts on the western slope. And I'll say that as I provided in my summary and analysis, the existing statute is over 100 years old, and the treasurers in this case are only reimbursed up to a $100 maximum per year for the work that they do on behalf as ex officio treasurers for these districts in their counties. County treasurers say that's an insufficient amount to cover their own costs and are asking for an update of the statute. This caught some irrigation districts by surprise. It's my understanding that the Treasurers Association didn't do a lot of stakeholding on this. I think they saw a problem and went to Senator Rich of Mesa County, who herself is a former county treasurer, and they decided to move forward. That being said, the bill is very much in flux. It sounds like some of our irrigation districts on the West Slope, along with Special Districts Association and County Treasurers Association, are working on some pretty meaningful amendments, and hopefully that'll lead to a middle ground compromise on this. So I'm not recommending a position on this, but I did want to bring it to your attention because it is possible that it may impact, or you may hear about it from districts in your counties.
Any questions for Zane? Any comments on this? All right, I don't, oh, Kathleen Curry.
Yes, thank you. And thanks, Zane, for that. The bill is going to be likely amended, and Senator Rich is willing to do that. There's even confusion about what the intent of the bill is. And I don't think she was trying to, she says she wasn't trying to remove the treasurers from that function. So she's been working with all of us and their lobbyists for the treasurers to come up with language that's more workable. And Zane's right, there's a handful of districts within our river district boundaries that are impacted. So stay tuned. I think we're going to come up with a good work product in the end.
Great. Anyone else with a comment? Thanks, Director Curry. All right. I will note that Director Mike Richard has joined us. So welcome, Mike. And Zane, you had one more.
Sorry, I needed to unmute. This is a bill that dropped the day before yesterday. House Bill 1152 prohibits a non-resident foreign citizen, foreign entity, or foreign government of the People's Republic of China, the Russian Federation, or any other country determined by the U.S. Secretary of State to be a state sponsor of terrorism from acquiring a controlling ownership share in ag land, mineral rights, or water rights in the state. I wanted, in conversations with council and with Andy Mueller, we decided this should be on your radar. My guess from talking with folks is that this bill does not have legs. It does not have a sponsor in the Senate, and it does not have a co-sponsor from the majority party in the House. That being said, it's hard for me to envision a scenario in which this moves forward, but I am happy to monitor it for the board in that it, just given that it does affect water rights in the state, and wanted to make sure it was on your radar. I'm happy to answer any questions if the board has any.
Okay, questions for Zane? Yeah, Mark Catlin.
Okay. I pulled a title that was just going to create a registry of foreign ownership. And there was not much of an appetite for that at all. Simply, I thought we ought to all know who our neighbors were, so to speak, they're foreign entities. And, I held that title for quite a while and finally just let it go because there was no interest in it, to tell you the truth. I think the Department of Ag would like to figure out some way to do that. And maybe somewhere down the road, we might be able to, but banning people from owning stuff seems to impact some of my growers' 401k.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's telling people where to sell their house. They don't ask anybody any questions about that. So it's the same kind of thing. We'd all like to do something, but I don't think this one would be the one that probably will have any, like was said earlier, any legs in the building.
Thanks, Representative Catlin. Director Winery.
Yeah, this is more for Zane. The other evening, actually on watching, there was a TV program. It was actually on the National News Network that they talked about foreign entities in Texas and how much agricultural land that they've bought. And they thought that there was some national bill that was going to be passed because, and I agree with Director Catlin, you can't tell people who to sell to or what to sell to. I'm a big private property rights owner, but they'd said they'd own 5% of the farms in Texas or ranches in Texas, and more they were after bigger businesses that was controlling the food market for the United States. Have you heard anything of that thing?
I have not heard of anything on the federal level. I'm happy to do some research and find out if there's anything circulating out there. No, I think the difference here with this state bill that's been introduced is that it's specific to specific countries that are on the National Secretary of State's terrorism list. But certainly, I think we saw in our own polling results that there is concern about foreign ownership of land and water. It would not surprise me if that is making its way up to the federal level. And again, I'm happy to do some digging and find if there's anything out there.
Yeah, no, and maybe that, I'll see if I can even find, I can't remember what news station it was on. But it was definitely, there was a concern about it, about all the major corporations they own and all the farm ground that's being corporated, So that was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Winery.
Any
Unless
other
there,
questions? I don't see any other hands up. Zane, you have anything else for us?
just wanted to flag that on the call today is Gail Berry. She's one of our 2 contract lobbyists that serves as a pair of eyes and ears for me when I'm not down here. I just wanted to make sure the board is aware that we are continuing to work with Gail and Chris Vodapal, who Chris had a conflict this afternoon, but expect to see them on these calls throughout the session, and I will lean on them for their expertise, be it on budget or politics or other things. So they are a part of our team down here, and we're happy to have them.
Great, thank you. And I do see Chris on the call at the moment anyway.
Oh, great.
Madam President, if we can, we were trying to make sure we provided an opportunity as we discussed pieces of legislation for any members of the public to weigh in or provide insight. We had some constituents express a desire to have that ability, and I just want to make sure that we pause on maybe at this point, when you think appropriate, I should say, to make sure there aren't public comments on either of these bills.
Yes, thank you very much for that reminder. And yeah, just hit the raise hand button and we will recognize you. I don't see anyone who has their hand raised. And have you received anything in writing on any comments on legislation?
Nothing on my end.
Okay.
Nothing with our office either.
Okay, so we will continue to do this in the future for folks on the call. If you have comments, we would like to hear from you at these calls.
I apologize, Madam Chair. Old habits are hard to break, and I just dove in. And so I will be better in the future about providing an opportunity for public comment on individual bills. So that's my fault.
We'll up our skills for the next meeting, right?
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Andy, for that reminder.
Sure.
All right. Next up on our agenda is an update from the general manager. We all got an email memo from Andy on January 31st discussing system conservation program and possible policies. So I'll turn it over to you, Andy.
Great. Well, thank you, Madam President. I want to say this whole area is moving fairly quickly, given the recent submittal by 6 states agreeing to a series of items that should be modeled as part of the Bureau's supplemental EIS for the operations of Powell and Meade. The California chose not to join those states and submitted its own. There's a lot of reasons for that. I think the primary one being that 6 states believe that it's absolutely appropriate to assess system loss accounting against California and Arizona and Nevada. And that's something that our district and the state have been asking and demanding for decades. So seeing that finally making some progress with the 6 other states, I think, or the 5 other states, is really impressive. California objects to that because they would take a large hit, and they think that their senior water rights status should protect them from that. I would just point out that our most senior water rights get hit with both evaporative loss and transit loss every day of the administration, anytime administration is being applied to water in the state of Colorado. So we strongly disagree with the way that California has characterized this as an attack on their seniority. We think that's a incorrect phrasing. I think it's convenient for them in the press. I think it's not accurate or frankly intellectually honest. on this. And so it is, the commissioner and the assistant secretary of Interior really wanted to see a 7-state agreement. I can tell you that there was a lot of effort on both sides of the current split to try to find some common ground. There was none to be found on this issue. And so those proposals have been submitted. You have copies of them from Peter Fleming last night on email. And I want to just say, what we don't have right now is the agreement to any concrete way between themselves to reduce their consumptive use immediately by 2 million or more acre feet. We have, together with Commissioner Mitchell, called for them to commit to that, so that we're not just flushing water down the system to their open valves in a system conservation pilot program, or later in a demand management program. And so there is now some discussion at the UCRC about reconsidering the timing of the system conservation, what they call a pilot program. They have initially delayed, as of Monday, they delayed the application deadline, which was supposed to be yesterday. They have extended that out to March 1st at this point. And, conversations between the states continue. It's not really clear whether our state or other states in the upper division will, in fact, decide not to approve system conservation contracts, but it is possible that that's where this is headed, which makes it very hard for our producers to know what to do, because this system conservation program has some interest from our ag community in particular. I haven't talked to anybody from other sectors who might be interested, but it is hard to know that whether or not you should bother to send in an application if there isn't certainty with respect to the program moving forward. And it's also a little hard. It's being done very late in time. I met with Amy Moyer, and I met with the Uncompahgre Water Users Board and an advisory committee on this subject just on Monday evening, and it was, I think, very frustrating to them. They need to make decisions. Well, they made decisions last fall to move forward. They need to make more, take actions and make decisions to move their crops forward. And certainly waiting to the application deadline of March 1st, and then a 2 to 3 or 4 week processing of those applications really puts those growers, certainly in our lower basins, at a very distinct disadvantage in terms of whether or not they decide to participate in a program like this. It was rolled out very quickly by the UCRC, which in part is why our district now has a seat at the table. And I want to just make sure everybody understands what that seat is. We're not running the system conservation program. We are not the party who will be responsible for receiving, and then distributing federal money. That all goes through the UCRC. We are not the parties responsible for verifying conserved consumptive use and termination or some form of production of water. That all sits with the UCRC, those jobs. Our role in this process is much smaller in that we through discussions with Commissioner Mitchell, it was agreed that we would review any application that originates where the point of diversion and the place of use of the water historically under their decrees is within the physical boundaries of the Colorado River District. So within our 15 county area, those water right applications, those applications that go into the UCRC, will be forwarded to the state of Colorado and then to us for a review. Our review is just an initial review to determine whether or not we believe it complies with our policy, and we can approve, we can reject, we can approve with conditions. We can reject it and tell them to come back with changes. We can do any number of things. So it's not, and I think there was some concern raised by at least one of our directors, understandably, that if we were taking on a major role in this, and do we have the staff and time to do it? And I'm not excited about reviewing all the applications. If there are, in fact, lots of applications, that will take staff time. But I want to be real clear that we are not assuming or taking on financial and or administrative obligations in this program. And I think that is important for the board to understand. And maybe before I get into the proposed policy, I want to see if there are any questions on the things I just covered. And then I'm happy to move into the specifics in the policy.
Questions for Andy? Andy, you sort of have alluded to this, but maybe could you just give a couple of sentences on why is it that we want to do this? I think the importance of the River District role is critical to what we're talking about here.
I agree. And I think that excellent point, Madam President. The River District is established 85 years ago to protect the water supply within our boundaries in the 15 counties that we currently cover. And in protecting that, it's making sure that there's an adequate water supply at folks' head gates and at pump stations for any and all beneficial uses within the district. Today, we include within that recreational environmental uses, in channel uses. We also include our historic consumptive water users and all of those aspects. This program is an offshoot of something that was done for a 4-year period on a much smaller scale, with a total of $8 million being spent in the Upper Basin, and one that the River District, together with our partners in the Water Bank Work Group, administered financially and administratively with our water users. And we reviewed all of those applications, approved them, and actually did verify things such as the either irrigation or non-irrigation, deficit irrigation, those kind of things. And so we have concerns in this program in particular, similar to those concerns that I think this board has raised over demand management, in that a program at the size and scope that the UCRC has announced rather hastily, without any kind of sideboards, could have some significant unintended negative consequences on the agricultural industry and production. And so what we're trying to do is find a way to perform our statutory obligation in terms of protecting our water supply for our communities, while at the same time being very cognizant of private property rights and the ability to engage in market activities and available opportunities with those private water rights. We do our best. I think we're trying to make this app that fairly limited and targeted at things that we believe are designed to protect our communities and our agricultural industry. I would just say that this is not a free market that's being set up, right? This is the government funded market that wouldn't exist without a government policy at the federal level, which says we, the Upper Basin, need to dry up our agriculture in order to add water to the system to help bring it into balance. And that's a federal policy that they're trying to implement through this program. That's why the federal government funded $125 million. If they were to receive takers at that $150 an acre foot offer, that price, it would result in approximately 833,000 acre feet of water from the Upper Basin. This is a 1-year program right now. I can't imagine that they will get that kind of interest, but that's an amazing amount of water that would come out of the Upper Basin if that happened, or not be utilized in the Upper Basin. The program may be extended for years into the future, and you'll see a new footnote that I added, trying to explain why we have these running 3-year averages and references I made to multi-year programs. It's really hard to tell. The situation is so in flux that we wanted to at least introduce those concepts that you had developed during the demand management conceptual market structure into this system conservation review. Keep in mind, if the program's only 1 year, none of those 3-year running averages or any of that really apply to this situation. But I think that it's important for us to make those points, because I think it is likely that this program or another one like it will be continued or rolled out. So that's really where I think our role is, but I certainly want to make sure that I'm following the board's direction on this.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's really helpful context. Director Catlin, did you have your hand up? And then no, okay, Director Haas.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Andy, a question on kind of what this is. So it says it's a policy, but it also feels a little bit like a mandate for staff to really engage at a very high level. And I'm just trying to understand, how do you see implementation of this in terms of, is it just guiding how we engage, or is it like really creating this very active involvement from the staff?
Well, I think that the staff will be given the role that the commissioner has asked us to play. We, in fact, will be actively involved in reviewing applications, and that's it. I mean, that's where our active involvement ends, is reviewing, understanding the applications, making sure that the information that is needed to make decisions is there. And so yeah, there's some active involvement by staff, but I don't anticipate that being long running. If the program continues multiple years, it will be, it will reoccur. And I would hope and think that as this program evolves, or something else takes its place, that we will learn what works or what doesn't, what is too cumbersome, what is not, what is intended to do one thing but isn't achieving it. So I view this as the beginning point. Apologize for all of you who thought that maybe you'd look at it once and never have to think about it, but I really do think this is just the beginning of our involvement in this kind of stuff. And so I that's part of why there's probably a little bit more in there than otherwise would be. But I think we just have to make sure we think through this stuff. I hope that helps, Director Haas.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, general questions for Andy, or specific questions on the proposed policy? Director Munger.
Yeah, I just, Andy, you did a great job, and staff, you guys did a great job coming up with this initial blush, first look at it, and the rest. I guess wow, it's engineer's dream or paid engineer's dream, and that how and who's going to be accountable for all this stuff, and are we going to be doing that? Or and again, I think Director McGinnis brought kind of up that point a little bit too, and yeah, we want to have all those stop gaps and checks and balances in there. Looks like my camera's messing up too, but anyhow, so yeah, and going back to staff thing, and I just want to keep it brief here in the broader perspective. Yeah, I don't know, maybe we end up having a contract with somebody to end up helping us through this thing, and and that's what they do for us. I see John Courier's on our call as well, so maybe he's looking for a job, but I don't know. And I'll shut up. So I think there's the broader concept, there are all the great points that are all in there, but wow, I don't know how we're going to be able to be the police.
Yeah, and I would just say again, Doug, we're not the entity that will be doing any policing. We're not the entity that's distributing any federal money. I think, quite honestly, I want to be real clear for our water users, especially anybody who's on the phone, on the call, or anybody that you're talking to as directors who are interested in this. Frankly, I think getting that federal money out and distributed to the landowners, to the water rights owners, or the tenants, however that works, I think that is going to be an incredibly long, arduous process for any applicant or participant in this program. And I just want to be really clear. There's a lot of checks and balances and the oversight by the federal government because of the expenditure of federal money that wasn't there in the early system conservation pilot program because it wasn't federal money. And so this is a very different operation. I don't know how the UCRC is going to do it, but we're not offering to do that. We're not. I want to make it really clear, Doug, to you and to all of our board members, I am not taking on that job. And we're not even taking on the job of verifying that people are drying their fields up before they get paid. We're not doing any of that. So this is just reviewing applications and approving with conditions or denying. And so that's it. And I want to make sure people understand that.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. We've got Director Gray and then Director Haas.
Thank you, Madam President. I guess I just wanted to say, it feels like we're just really speeding along and we have the potential for, well, I guess let me back up. We've seen in most of our lives, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. And we want to make sure when we go down this road that, and Andy, I liked what you said, that if it's 1 year and we need to make some changes to our policy, we're going to be allowed to. But then, of course, those who are already in under our current policy that might have some consequences that we didn't expect or some things we want to change are going to very much resist being told, no, you've got to change. And so I don't know how big of a rush there is to do this now. And I kind of think that we need to wait and see what the lower basin's actually going to do or what reclamation's going to do if the lower basin doesn't come together on what they're going to do before we jump into implementing this. And I know that the UCRC has already got the money and they're wanting to do it. So I understand there's a catch-22, but just wanted to register that be careful what you start is kind of the motto I think we need to think about.
Well, Director Gray, I agree with you. We're in a bit of a quandary here on that, and I wanted to just speak to that because I would love to wait, and I'd love to say, hey, no, this needs to be done slower, more thoughtfully. But if the UCRC program continues to move forward, we have water rights owners in our district that want to participate in this. I have talked with many of them, not certainly all of them, and so. I think that we can't just sit back and say, I guess we could say we're not going to participate. That is a direction you could give me. And we could say we are not going to review any applications or try to put our design on the eligibility or implementation of the program. You can certainly tell me to do that as a board, but otherwise, I think that there's a pretty significant chance this thing is going to roll out this year in some fashion. And because of that, I would say we need to consider our rules. I think that we probably don't need to adopt them today. But I would think we have water users who are watching this to understand what it is that they will need to provide to us to get approved. And so to the extent we can provide those rules this week or 2 weeks from today in a final format, that's where I think we ought to go. And it is at this point up to the UCRC and perhaps our state to decide whether or not they're going to move forward with the program. But I think because we're not in that driver's seat, we either have a set of rules and direction from you, a policy from you as to how we fit in that picture, or we say we're not going to. But it has to be one of those two directions to us would be what we're looking for.
So let me just follow up. Andy, I wasn't really thinking that we, as you say, we don't have the power or the ability to put a stop to this and shouldn't if it's going to roll out anyway. I was, when you say something that shouldn't happen, then you should offer a path forward. And I didn't do that. A path forward in my mind is that we caveat anything we adopt, whether it's today or in the near future, with the carve out that this is a 1 year we put this together fast. If you get a contract, it's going to be 1 year now. We're anticipating up to 4 out of 10-year contracts in the future, but this is so new. This is 1 year, and we reserve the ability to change our policies going forward as we get more familiar. I think, to me, that's something that I would have to see before I would want to put our policy out there.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Good addition. We have Director Haas, Director Curry, and then Director McGinnis. I want to do a time check. We have 25 minutes left on this call. We do have an executive session with the memo that Peter sent out to us with 3 documents. So I would suggest we take about 5 more minutes for this conversation. Like Andy said, maybe we're not quite ready to adopt it today, but after this background and discussion, if we can all look at the specifics and be ready to adopt something in our call 2 weeks from today. Andy, does that work?
That certainly works for me. And I would just encourage directors as well as the members of the public who are on the phone, feel free to send in comments and in an email to me. I would prefer to get them, probably from a week from today, so I can then turn them around and get them back out to the board. But I would appreciate that. I have gotten some comments from water users and some board members, and I appreciate that. I've done my best to incorporate them or reference them in my revision. So I just thank you.
That's great. All right. So we'll aim for a week from today for comments and then possible adoption at our meeting in 2 weeks. All right. So 3 final comments, Director Haas.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll try to keep this really short. I think what I'm struggling with is this idea that it is what's the return on investment as things are changing so quickly. And so can we walk that line of providing guidance for how the River District is going to engage and provide advice to the state without making it look so prescriptive. There's a lot of things in there right now that look like kind of mandates about no injury and mitigation for secondary impacts for a 1-year program. And it's kind of, I'm just struggling with kind of the level of specificity with what we're actually going to be providing to the state. And just, I guess I would just advise us to keep our options as open and fluid as possible, because the situation in the upper basin and in the whole basin is so fluid that kind of give ourselves that room to move if we need it. Happy to talk more about it later, though.
Thank you. Director Curry.
Thank you, Madam President. And I'll just make a quick statement that I think actually that the state's consideration of these applications is probably not going to be as thoughtful. No offense to anybody from the state, but I'm happy that we have an injury determination or an injury consideration in the draft policy. I'm happy that we're thinking about mitigating other impacts, because I don't know that if we don't do it, I don't know who will. And as a water user, I want to make sure that impacts to other water users are taken into consideration. So, and having said that, that's just a perspective that I wanted to throw out there, and I'm happy to elaborate it. And if we had time, I would, but just wanted to get that on the table.
Great. And I think following up with more specifics to Andy in the next week, if you all have time to do that, would be really helpful, because these are critical points. Director McGinnis, you've got the last comment on this.
And very brief as well, Madam Chairwoman. So there's going to be a lot of political pressure on the upper commission to get this money out and to do this. And this is, I think the administration of this program is going to be very complex. And so I think the commission's going to be very tempted to promote this to water users and then come to us and say, you want the money, you administer. So I know we're saying today that that's not going to be our role and so on, but they're going to have to ramp up with an understanding of several different, the upper basin states and their different complexities, put all that together. And the government will take the easiest route with the most complex regulation, but just be ready. They may come back, say, you want the money, your water users want the money, here it is, but you got to run it. That's my concern. And I think your comments today, Andy, were very, very helpful, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Director Catlin.
I have one question. Andy, you say you've talked to a number of growers that are showing interest. What is that number so far?
Well, that's a good question. I would say we probably talked to a dozen or more
Okay.
water users, but not hundreds of water users. I would say there's interest in some of our big projects in trying to put together something systematic within those projects, federal projects. So they're looking at these issues.
No, thank you. I wanted to make sure we were talking what kind of numbers. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Well, Andy, you got some feedback. Looks like an easy task, right? So,
Always.
thank you for your work on this. All right. Next up is a report from General Counsel, and looks like a move into executive session.
Thank you, Madam President. I would make a recommendation that the board convene into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-402(4)B and E to discuss the item on agenda tab 3A.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right. Moved by Director Haas, second by someone. Director Winery, we'll say. All right, we are in executive session.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay.
I don't know if we're letting people in from the.
We have no one in the waiting room.
No one's in the waiting room, so I would state for the record that during the executive session portion of the River District Special Board meeting today, the board discussed with staff and council the item listed on agenda topic 3A, and that there is no formal action proposed coming out of executive session. And appreciate the board's time in going over a lot of that.
Great. Well, thank you, Zane, Peter, and Andy, and thanks to all the board members. We are adjourned. We will be meeting again, same time, same place, February 9th.